Don't go breaking my heart.
I wouldn't if I tried.
Welcome to UberCube, the podcast we discuss all things cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, a.k.a. UberBear, and today we are joined by a very special guest.
Oh, hi. I'm Chris Sammich, otherwise known as Sammich. I'm sorry. Wasn't paying attention there for a second. Apologies. Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And then we have our regulars on. We've got both.
Hi, it's me. I'm Magic.
And Stu.
Also known as May.
Yeah.
And Stu. Hi.
And so we wanted to do something kind of special. So I'm going to push this episode out pretty quick because at this time of recording, by next week, we will be road tripping to CubeCon, Madison,
Around
Wisconsin. 18 hours in a minivan. And we needed something to listen to. And we figured you guys did too. So we thought it would be pretty cool to kind of do, not so much a primer, but kind of like, we've got 5 cubes in this year. And I thought it would be neat if we can kind of, we're going to say like pitch, if you will, right? Kind of tell you a little bit about what we have to offer today and, check out our wares, you know what I mean? So without further ado, we're going to enjoy our libations of the show. Chris, what are you having?
What did you call me? I couldn't hear it. What did you say? No. I'm having a New Belgian Voodoo Ranger Juice Force IPA, a nice Imperial IPA.
How about yourself, May?
I am having a glass of Cabernet.
Very refined. And I have myself a delicious glass of this 12-year-old Highland Park single malt scotch.
I have that, and I am pairing that with a Sinful Apple by Angry Orchard Hard Cider, because I was kind of feeling like I wanted a little bit of, kind of rob my wife's stash, not going to lie to you here, so here we are. So let's go ahead and crack my only beer open along with Chris. Let's go. And so here we are. We're going to talk about, so we're all going to CubeCon 2024. There are 5 cubes out of this group that are featured, and of those cubes, there's several repeats. May, you've got a repeat.
Mm-hmm.
Second time. Chris, repeat.
Yeah.
I've got a 3-peat with the Artifact Cube, and then I got a couple of no-peats going in. We're going to see how those go.
A couple of first-timers.
Yeah, we definitely got some first-timers. Matter of fact, it's probably the first time they've ever been played. We'll find out how that goes.
That is an interesting way to play test your cube, is at a 600-player event.
What if you just
Madison.
built it and never tested it and just sent it into the masses? That would be fantastic.
Oh, no.
Good luck.
Someone notate this moment. So that way,
Someone
afterwards,
do it.
we can
I'm
hold
challenging.
Anthony accountable to it.
Oh, yeah. Somebody's going to do it. Somebody's build a cube.
Someone save it to like a soundboard or something.
So, without further ado, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of give a little bit of an elevator pitch about each one of our cubes, and we have them kind of in an order. I have 3, and then May has the Fae, and then Chris has the Peasant. So we'll kind of talk about each one of those, and what we're going to do is give a little bit of a mild primer and talk about what we've kind of learned from previous seasons, etc. And here we go. So let's start out with UberBear's Artifact Cube.
It's a veteran.
It's a
It's a mainstay at this point. I think if you get featured 3 times, then you should get to take home the World Cup or something, or it just becomes like a staple every year for CubeCon. What do you think?
Like a cup from the Hampton Inn or something full of coffee. It'd be kind of great. I would take that because it's going to be a long road trip back.
That's good enough.
I'm okay with that. I'm a simple person. But what I've kind of learned is through the 3 seasons, and this for anyone listening, it's their first time having their cube presented at a major event. We've talked about this before. There's that tension, right? I remember that first year, it was CubeCon 2022, where we went out and we've all meeting each other for the first time, and we're unveiling our projects to the universe here. And it was definitely a little bit nerve-wracking, right? I want to get it right. I want it to look pretty. I want my lands to look good. I hope I have all my tokens, et cetera, et cetera. All these things you feel.
There's nothing that a Sharpie can't take care of with the tokens. But yeah, I can imagine that's got to be pretty daunting. Big feather in the cap of you guys and everyone else that has had a cube featured there. But yeah, daunting because it's about the numbers as well. And there's been, let's just say, a lot of growth in the attendees over the last couple of years.
Yeah, so that brings up an interesting point because I am a 3-peat. So the first season was the Selesnya Boros Menace. And then the second season was still the belief or the latched onto the idea, the meta that Selesnya was still, I guess, the go-to. And unbeknownst to the audience, I had kind of watered it down with intent based on what I had learned from the first season. And then Blue kind of stepped in and started wreaking some havoc. The third season.
Hang on. You're glossing over something.
I am. It might have been a Kappa Cannoneer, maybe.
Yeah, there we go. There was just this relatively untested, absolute powerhouse that somehow found its way into the artifact cube in the form of Kappa Cannoneer. And it just kind of ran the table, so to speak.
I just tried to speed bump right through that. And
I'm not allowing that. I'm sorry. So maybe that's a good lesson for this cube and every other cube. Look for the Kappa Cannoneers and its ilk in these cubes and any other cube.
So we're kind of moving into season 3 here. So what can you expect? So I've learned from these other, and that's the thing that I'm going to offer to anybody listening, is something about going to these large events and getting outside of your traditional meta, breaking outside of your play group, and receiving all the feedback. And most of it's going to be good. You're going to have to also deal with the occasional not so great feedback, but feedback is feedback. You know, good news is good news, bad news, bad news. You have to take it all with a grain of salt. But your cube will perform better ultimately. It gets tuned. It gets run through the ringer. This card is right, this card is wrong, etc. It will be overwhelming at how many changes. Every time, guys, I know that Chris and I and Stu have done road trips back, and by the time we leave CubeCon, we're already kind of planning what needs to get cut on the way home. We did that last year. Mm-hmm. You can kind of expect that on your road trips to have these conversations. Chris, you actually I want to go a little side note here. You just talked about you actually missed a card after the cutoff date.
Yeah, I missed several cards from the new Duskborn set. I didn't have time, so I was just kind of rushing. I didn't do any sort of like, we're going to proxy a whole bunch of cards and just throw them in the cube. I didn't have time to do any of that. So I just sort of, last week, I just said, all right, these look good. We're going to get these and put them in. And after, of course, the cutoff date, I'm like, oh, these like 4 or 5 cards look pretty good. So like, it's going to happen. So
that's why I wanted to point that out. It's that tension too with having a cutoff date and hoping your cube is in the place so that you can then present said cube. We all kind of know that. May, you know that feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's kind of dodge back to UberBear's artifact cube. What's different? What can you kind of expect? I've taken green and I've worked really hard to turn green into something that's not hate. The first iteration of this cube, we've talked about it a dozen times, was artifact versus anti-artifact. And it's been interesting with all these set releases to get more green cards that don't hate artifacts as much, but rather support them in a lot of ways. And I kind of want to just glance over that a little bit for a second. And then another thing that you can expect in this cube that wasn't really prevalent as of last year and the year prior was a lot more counters matters. You experienced that recently, didn't you, Steve?
Yeah, so in our most recent playtest of this, I'll tell you, I pick one, pack one, hardened scales. I figure, you know what? This looks like an incredible build-around card. Obviously, it's been a very strong card in constructed formats as well. So I figure, okay, I'm always looking for a theme. I'm looking for an anchor, something that can really be a big generator, a big engine for a deck that I'm going to build. And Hardened Scales just, to me, shouted out, as it's written on the card, +1/+1 counters. So Hardened Scales is 1 green mana enchantment. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put on it instead. So immediately I start to think of, right, I'm looking for the payoffs. I'm looking for anything that can synergize or with +1/+1 counters. And I would say it worked pretty darn well. I think I had a 2-1 record. I unfortunately did not get to get a picture of it for our Deckboast Discord channel. But I love that this is a very aggressive-minded kind of strategy, right? You're looking to be proactive. You're looking to spend your mana. And I always would prefer to do that typically unless I'm really drafting a hard control deck. So anything that allows me to be proactive and look for fun and engaging pieces like Hardened Scales and like Ozolithar. Lux Cannon was one of the big payoff cards. And it was just really fun to draft and really
Lux
fun
Artillery.
to play. Lux Artillery.
Lux Cannon should be in there. That's a sweet card.
That's a new card.
That.
I've made that myself. But yeah.
No, it's a real card.
Really fun.
You proliferate and kill things. It takes forever, like 3 or 4 turns.
And I was going to say, it's in the show notes as well, which I like. But a card like Drown in Ichor, which is a 1 colorless, 1 black sorcery, target creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn, proliferate. So not quite at the power level as something like Dismember, right? Because it's only 1 mana and you can do it at instant speed. This is at sorcery speed, but having a removal plus another piece to the puzzle when it comes to the counters is really strong.
Which leads me into the next thing I learned besides, green needed to change up a little bit was the lack of non-artifact removal, as in creatures, etc., right? It was so heavily focused on the idea of killing artifacts that some of the creatures and that strategy of, and this came up often, I'm just not going to draft the actual theme and I'm going to hide behind the big green dumb monster that's not an artifact. Well, you won't be able to do that as well this year, because I've kind of upped the ante and done a little bit of crossover. And you can find that in the list. And I will encourage anybody that's listening to this, because the essence of time, we're covering 5 cubes here in a very short amount of time. We're going to say a lot of card names. They will be in the show notes and or go to Scryfall. But upping the ante on the actual creature spot removal was just something I wanted to do. And this year, you can expect, and this is what I like about this cube, more technicality. Chris, do you mind taking on this first card underneath there, Into the Pit?
Yeah, it's a fairly new one. If I'm think it's out of one of the new commander sets. Into the Pit for 2 and a black. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast spells from the top of your library by sacrificing a non-land permanent, in addition to paying up the other costs. That's just a very cool card. You can build around this thing very easily in that cube, I believe.
Yeah.
So there's a sacrifice theme in there, as far as I know, if I remember correctly.
Don't be giving away the secrets, Chris. Don't be giving away the secrets.
Yeah, I thought it was supposed to be what's a cool deck, but whatever. Okay, whatever. Okay.
Reveal all the secrets. Do it more out of spite. Do it.
I'm gonna give away every single secret possible.
So, May, this next one, and I promise we won't talk about whose cards, but Forensic Gadgeteer. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Are you familiar with a certain combo that this card plays with? Anybody?
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to call this one out?
Heck yeah.
I don't know the combo offhand.
It's a certain 3 mana artifact that you can tap for 3 mana and then untap also for 3 mana.
Yes. And it keeps reducing the cost of it.
Basalt Monolith.
Yeah.
It actually has there's a couple of combos with this.
Because it reduces the activated. Yep.
That's right.
Yep. So this is another thing I've added this year out of Risk. This is Forensic Gadgeteer, and I'm just going to go ahead and say for anybody fighting, this is create the tension now for the card Basalt Monolith. So now you can throw it with something like a Walking Ballista or a whole consortium of ideas. I don't care. You can do what? Triska, whatever. I don't care. Go nuts.
Triskaidekaphobia?
No.
Or Triskelion?
The big dumb robot.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's kind of an improvement I've done. Another card that I did was one, Chris and I talked about this a long time ago, and I was a little nervous about adding this to the cube. And that's what I want to kind of do as a takeaway for this conversation, is after all these kind of playing it safe and trying to get my cube to be right for presentation before a large con, I decided now that I'm just, I'm kind of just going to take risk. It's like, I know, I remember like last year, I was actually looking at Unctus or somewhere around there. I think it was a spoiler. I'm not quite sure on the timelines. But this card had caught my radar, but I held back for so long adding it, thinking it would break the cube. But Unctus the Grand Mechatech, for 1 colorless and 2 blue, you get a legendary artifact creature for Phyrexian Vidalkin. Lots of words there, good lord. 2/4. Other blue creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. Then you can play blue Phyrexian mana until the end of the turn. Target creature you control becomes a blue artifact in addition to the other colors and types. Activate only as a sorcery. I swear to God, why they say activate only as a sorcery and make you read all that, and you get to the end, and you're like, I can't do this right now. Oh my God. It's like one of those little disclaimers at the bottom.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've added cards like this. But this next one, I think Chris is excited about.
Oh yeah, I love the Metal Worker. I love good old Metal Worker. He's not quite good enough for like a vintage power cube anymore, but he's pretty good in this cube. What I hear, it's like he's a 3 mana 1/2 little artifact creature. Got really awesome art. I love the art on this card, by the way.
Yes.
And just tap it. You got any artifacts in your hand? Reveal them. You get 2 mana per artifact revealed. It's pretty darn good. Helps cast that Triskelion on turn, I don't know, 4. Maybe 3, whatever. If you have,
I saw somebody drop a triplicate Titan like within turn 3 with this thing.
Yeah.
Going nuts, just display. And I'm okay with that. Like, that's what I want to have. If you notice now, we're kind of tying this one off.
I will say, I think there's not going to be many, especially older Magic players, that aren't going to be excited to see Metal Worker in there, right? So it's just such an iconic card. Love to see that in there.
Yeah, so this is some of the changes you can expect to see out of UberBear's Artifact Cube for CubeCon 2024. That's a lot to say. It's like marbles in my mouth there.
You should write that on a Magic card.
But what's interesting is because my cube has done this for 3 times now, I'm kind of find myself dodging the metas, right? Metas get formed, opinions get formed, shake it up, and that's what I recommend anybody does. But that's enough about my cube. Let's move over to the one everybody wants to hear about, the number one cube in the world.
I don't know about number one cube in the world, but
Don't be modest.
it's going to be my Fae Cube that we're moving on to because that's what it says on the list, and I'm notorious for just staying on script. Totally, that's what I'm known for, right?
Of course you are. Never veering off down an unknown path. Who would ever think of that?
Me, I'd never. I'm not a red player. I've never even touched the color.
All right, tell us what's new, because May, we haven't made jokes about this like we used to, but we used to sort of comment on the fact that you did used to make a lot of changes with the Fae Cube, right? Iterations used to come pretty thick and fast, a lot of changes. What's been your strategy as far as preparing your cube for CubeCon 2024, and how have you sort of gone down the path of either trying to really make it fresh and new for players that have got the great fortune to experience it in 2023, and how have you been impacted by that journey with the decisions that you've made for CubeCon 2024?
Yeah, so I've still been sticking out to the low and slow upgrade strategy, if we want to call that. And I wanted to basically spend a lot of months compiling a bunch of cards, especially since I wasn't Eldraine this year too?
I don't know.
Whoa.
It was there for last year. The Eldraine was there for last year. Wilds of Eldraine.
What is
released
time?
before that.
Thank you. So I don't think I had any Wilds of Eldraine cards for CubeCon at least. So that was new. Then I also had Woodburrow. And that added a lot of potential options that I kind of had to consider, so I needed to take a nice slow burn and look through cards. And there were still a lot of cards that would sneak into sets that were very sneakily like, this feels like it was made for the Fae Cube. But aside from that, I really wanted to take a lot of the advice that a lot of people have given me from last year and make constructive improvements around that. So one of the big pieces of advice that I was given was the fact that people felt like that the burn pieces felt out of place. So I replaced them with, let's say, red and green buffing type cards. That way Gruul can have a little bit more of a solid identity with that. So that way we can have some more internal synergy with that. We have things like Become Brutes and Monstrous Rage. So introducing a whole new token was a kind of small improvement, but, it is still an improvement. The other major improvements that I wanted to take with the constructive feedback I got from last year was that I really wanted to power up some of the other archetypes so that way they can keep up. Like, goblins last year were kind of put on the wayside. They were a thoroughly mid-representative deck, which I kind of felt was unfair for the goblins. Like, I've said before that they're my favorite, type. They're group of cards that I'm particularly favored of, so I always have to tread this very careful line of not making them too strong, or else it's just favoritism, right?
Let me ask you a question in regards to you got a lot of feedback last year, and you were able to kind of get that. And we talked about party was a thing, and adventure was a thing. Did you find yourself over time ruminating and processing that feedback to make these changes, or have you? Well, a follow-up question to that. Did you physically test cards in the middle of between last year's CubeCon and this year's CubeCon to see how it felt through playtesting, etc., to kind of get where you've landed at now?
So I did end up having a whole 2 extra tests this year. I didn't end up getting to play a lot of Fae Cube, unfortunately, but that's okay because the changes that I made were relatively lower to the ground anyways. But out of the tests that I did get, I came to the necessary conclusion that a lot of people were trying to tell me anyways. So, in the case of people who drafted goblins, while they felt like that they kind of felt like they were bringing scissors to a rock match, right? And I really wanted to give goblins something new this year, so one of my approaches was I wanted to buff some of these other archetypes, and including for goblins, I did Murderous Redcap, so that way we can have Murderous Redcap and Grumgully combos now available for goblins. And that's a huge change.
I love that change. That change would be 100% something I gravitate towards.
Yeah, because the meta last year was Orzhov Party, or sometimes Esper Party. Then it was fairies, usually in some variant of Dimir or Splash White. And yes, I'm aware that two of the major ones are in Esper, but followed up by Teamer Adventure. And those were like the big three that showed up last time. And then the slight fourth being Selesnya Elves and Wolves. I really just want to improve the other decks to hopefully give them a little bit more options.
So I spent some time today, and I was kind of cherry picking cards. I said, "Hey, I picked everybody's favorite cards for them." That's how I do.
Taking liberties.
I was taking liberties, but I'm like, "Oh my god, I love this card so much." But there's a couple of them that stood out to me, and the list is long. And again, for essence of time, I'm going to read a couple of them because they caught my eye. You did mention that Woe gave you some options, but I also noticed you got some really flavor on point from Blumburrow as well too, like you had mentioned before. And one of the cards that I kind of highlighted was Archive Dragon that I thought was pretty sick. For 4 colorless and 2 blue, you get a 4/6 flying Ward 2 dragon. Whenever Archive Dragon enters the battlefield, scry 2. Was that at CubeCon last year? I was uncertain.
No.
I know Woe was on the cusp, but I think you were even kind of aggravated because it was so close.
Yeah, it was ended up seeing so close to CubeCon, I didn't want to throw any Woe cards in. At least I'm pretty sure that's how it happened, but
I don't know. It's all blur, but I do remember this conversation happening.
I played against someone with like Pick Block Prankster and stuff in it.
You're right. You're right. What was during that time?
Yeah.
Point is that we had a whole hunt with that I forgot about somehow.
I'm sure some of the CubeCon goers are experiencing that as well, too. I've seen people in the Discords like, oh, man, I'm short a card. Has anybody got this card? Or has anybody got this token? I've been watching this going back and forth because that is something that the listeners and those attending these large events will experience, is kind of that little bit of like, I hope this entire compilation of cards is right. Like, I'm telling you that over a week and a half ago, I sat there, drank coffee, and laid all 3 of my cubes out. And that probably took... I drank a lot of coffee. I drank more than a pot because that was a solid 4 hours while the family was still sleeping, doing each one of those cubes and making sure that my Cube Cobra database matched the card type that I had in the car and whether or not I checked it as foil or not or blah, blah, blah. And I found mistakes. I actually found about 3 or 4 errors in each one of my cubes. So it's actually nice to do that anyways, a little bit of housekeeping. I do recommend that as a side note to any listeners. That's a good idea to go through and count your cards, right, Chris? Chris just experienced this.
Yeah. I was getting my cube all in order and realized there was somewhere someone has a wayward Simoth growth chamber. I don't know what happened to it. It's gone. I couldn't find it.
Luckily, it was a very...
I don't know where it is. I thankfully had an extra just sitting around. I mean, there's Simoth growth chamber, so it's not like it's an expensive card, but it's like...
I told Chris I picked up the sweet full art Simic growth chamber like the other day. I found it outside. Yeah. It was pretty great. Said that to him last
just in a bush somewhere.
How did that get there? Yeah.
May, I wanted to ask you about one card that we've got in our show notes. And again, all the listeners, go check it out. It shows what everyone's talking about during this episode. Is High Fae Negotiate. 3 and 2 black for a creature fairy warlock. It's a 3/5 flyer. And it also has bargain. So when it ETBs, if it was bargained, each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. And bargain is you may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token as you cast this spell. Was this just put in there purely from a flavor perspective, or was there other aspects of sort of that bargain mechanic that you wanted to include in the cube specifically?
Yeah, so I have quite a few enchantments, artifacts, and tokens in here already, and I figured that this would be a cool top end for a lot of those things. And the thing about fairies is that a lot of their core strategies revolve around making tokens. And when you're making a lot of those tokens, having that as a sort of top end can be a good way of just sneak in some extra damage, because against some of those early aggressive decks, then it can be enough to just kind of snuff whatever lead that they had.
Yeah, I like that card as well. It's like if you ordered Archon of Cruelty from Temu or, whatever. It's, you got that 3 life.
Archon.
I like it a little better than Vampire Sovereign. That's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Hey, another card that I picked that's one of May's favorites was actually, I love this card when I was going through your list, and it was the 3-tree mascot. May, tell us about this card. That card is, the art is so flavorful.
Yeah, so I was actually extremely excited when Woodburrow revealed 3-tree mascot, patchwork banner, and a bark form harvester, because for a while, one of the biggest issues that I've had was that I needed generic changelings or generic typal support, but getting it in a way that was flavorful was difficult. And even with like adaptive automaton, it was difficult to put that into the context of fairy tale-esque or like bloodline pretender. Like it can be difficult, and Stonework Pack Beast like doesn't really connect with what fairy tales are wanting to do. So having all of these three have just much improved flavor, and I think that what they do may not be as, let's say, interesting, but at least the Patchwork banner is going to be strong, because just having a generic anthem that also is mana rock is going to be pretty relevant, I hope.
How much of the inclusion of cards like 3-Tree Mascot are support for the party mechanic? Because I know that is a big deal for the Fae Cube.
And I'm going to read it real quick because we're talking about a totally obscure card that no one's going to notice. 3-Tree Mascot for 2 colors, you get a 2/1 artifact creature shapeshifter changeling. This card is every creature type. Really good in this cube. Pay 1, add 1 mana of any color, activate only once each turn. All right, now May.
Yes.
Party. As in, let's party.
This seems like a great party.
And Fae Cube party.
Yep.
How much of the support for that party mechanic was in consideration when you added cards like this?
Oh, always. It is always in my greatest consideration of how can I get more things that trigger party. Especially if we can get it generically supported. So not only just it improves the tools of the currently good party deck, but it also just makes it so that way other party decks could contest that Orzhov party deck. And some of the changes that kind of went overlooked from a previous update this year was that I improved some of the other party type cards by throwing in things like Synchronized Spellcraft or Skyclave Plunder, right? Where I wanted to have some more of these out of Orzhov top-end cards that we can get some party payoffs out of.
One thing I like about Patchwork Banner for 3 colorless, you get an artifact. As Patchwork Banner enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control the chosen type get +1/+1, and then tap it and add 1 mana of any color. I like the Anthem, but what I liked is the rocks, because you did have a limitation on rocks prior. And I found that things like, you know what deck I feel like would like this the most, the one I lose with a lot, is Fairies. I want that Anthem, but I also want the ability to do those little tricky things, all those flash components and stuff that Fairies do. And I feel like this card is like the perfect addition. When I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I had had this at UberCubeathon when you brought the cube down, because I was struggling to keep my mana base. Just the tempo of the mana, this is so nice. I love this card.
Yeah, I feel like that as a 3-drop, it might be able to let some other decks push extra pressure into those party decks, because the problem with last year was that a lot of people would go into one specific type and then really feel like that the people who were able to bring together the party were very rewarded, while your squeeze came like at a later turn. And this really helps recontextualize some of those early typal decks. So
I feel like cards like this, certainly not to criticize the inclusion or how they can work into a cube, but I also feels like cards like this are really chase cards for any cube where creatures turning sideways is going to be a somewhat significant aspect of most players' win conditions, because you've got a 3-mana rock and you've got this Anthem effect. I really do think that cards like this, like I say, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you can give us some feedback on, has this been a highly contested early draft pick in the drafts that you've had when you've play tested the cube before CubeCon?
Yeah, I think that this is a very safe pick. I don't think that it is the top-end bomby cards that could come up in packs,
right,
but it is one of those cards where if it comes up, it is probably correct to grab it.
I'm looking at it right now, asking myself, if I put a little bit of blood on the art, could I put this in my horror cube? Like, I like this with vampires and werewolves, too. This is great for any kind of typal synergies that you're trying to run. I think this card's great. May, any lessons that you learned or anything you can offer the audience from having already been to CubeCon and already presented and doing it again?
Yeah, so I think the biggest piece of advice is try not to be so anxious about how other people will interpret your cube, because the odds are that the criticism that you're going to get is probably not going to be as bad as you're expecting. And when you are going into bigger events like these with, say, this cube that you've hodgepodged together, and now you're finally getting a chance to show it off to people, it's a good chance to stress test it in a way that you might not have done before. And it can be very helpful for the eventual improvement of your cube. And I think that that's a very useful toolkit, even for next year if you haven't submitted.
I agree 100%. Let's move over to the next one featured. I have the Femme, and I'm thankful for May and the Birds of Paradise and Emma Partlow and all these individuals that have, even Chris, everybody's put their time and effort. I'm even give my buddy Stu here. Everybody's put time and effort to make sure this cube flows and aesthetically meets the requirements, and it has been play tested at this point. So I'm thankful for my group to really pushing the level of this cube. For those that aren't familiar with the Femme cube, the idea came to me several years back. It's just not something I had ever really seen before. A cube that it made me uncomfortable. It made me uncomfortable thinking about it. Could I do a cube that was outside of my boundaries, outside the wavelength of how I think as a cis white male, right? I mean, ultimately, let's just go ahead and drill down what it was. And could I take on a project? Because I'm a believer in the arts, and I love to read, and I love to paint, and I love to express myself via cube. And I thought it would be just kind of my personal challenge to take on something so difficult and walk that line, right? And see if I could pull this off. And I didn't. I mean, I wasn't successful at it initially, right? I still had these ingrained thoughts and these ideas and this thing that I can't seem to break on the side of me. And that's where I got the perspectives of people like May and Emma Partlow and others that gave me feedback on how to make this cube represent the idea that I was trying to do, which is it's a cube that embodies and empowers women, just the magic universe in general. I wanted to do something that has an unusual restriction. Like it's not only art forward, but it's also kind of, there's mechanical components to it too. How do I get these two pieces to meet in the middle? How do I get this beautiful piece of respectful art and have it actually be a functional cube card?
With difficulty.
It's hard.
Let's just say. I've seen you go grey over this cube more than any other of your cubes. Let's just say that.
Oh, yeah. Anybody hasn't listened to the episode with May and Emma Partlow, you should. You want to hear me just like slither down into a chair and want to go hide in a corner? And you know what? I needed it. And for anybody that listened to it, that's kind of what I put at the tagline at the end of this cube, is that aside from playing the cube, I'm hoping this cube offers more than just playing it. I hope it offers perspective. That's what I want. Anybody that doesn't realize or they want to challenge their own belief systems, I feel like this is a way to go about it. And I think I couldn't have done this without the efforts of others. I thought I could do this alone. This is not a cube you do alone. May, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm just very glad that when you took on this project, that you were very receptive to feedback and actually wanting to improve what the vision is, so that way it can connect with people in the way that you were intending.
So let's talk about how you win, Anthony.
Yep, let's do the win. Because we're going straight to the win.
This is really what we're here for on this episode. Because let's face it, the changes to the cubes and new cards and all that kind of stuff is all very well and good, right? But what the players really want to know, all the folks that were hoping to listen to this on their way to CubeCon, if you've got a long drive to Madison, Wisconsin, give you a little bit of content. How do you win with this cube? Tell us that, and why is it Golgari?
Yeah, it's definitely Golgari. But we also know there's some power outliers. And I went through and actually added them to this list of the cards that I've seen. We'll just say the words overperform. But if I had to describe this would be very much like, I would say that I've cloned the idea of Chris's cube. Chris has a Peasant cube, and I've taken a lot of the mechanics. I'm supporting Aristocrats and Blink and a light reanimator package and all the things that you would kind of expect in a Peasant environment with the art restriction attached. So looking at his model and how he's tested cards, I am testing boundaries. I do have some spikes. The first card that I have is a spike, and it is the cover art for this cube. This is fun. Let's do this. I'm going to do it. Hey, May, would you mind reading Sublime Epiphany to the audience, please? You monster. I won't do that. I won't do that because it's funny. It's a bit. But for 4 colorless and 2 blue, you get an instant. Choose one or more. Counter target spell, counter target activated ability or triggered ability, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hands, create a token that's a copy of target creature control, and target player draws a card.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of things to read.
It bloody should be. It's
It
6
actually
mana.
reads really smoothly, though, surprisingly,
does.
for that. It's like one of the most undercomplicated cards to understand. It's not like even like Cryptic Command.
Blue is just a very uncomplicated color in general.
Oh
This
yeah,
is a-
totally. Magic is a simple game
Totally.
and totally intuitive and easy
Exactly.
to understand.
I don't think this card's busted, but I think this card is fun, and I think people have a great time with it. It's kind of the Cryptic Command at home for this environment. I don't even know if that's fair to say. This card, people see it and they snap it up. This is a very strong card, and I don't feel comfortable oftentimes passing this card.
I mean, you can't tap your opponent's team, which, let's face it, is a fabulous ability of Cryptic Command. But honestly, in all seriousness, I think it's a fun card, right? If I would advise someone, don't get too carried away with trying to get as many modes on board as possible when you're casting it. Even if you just get to counter a spell and draw a card, like that's pretty good value for, even for 6 mana, it's not a vintage cube environment, but it's a fun card, and I think it embodies this cube beautifully.
This next one, though, May, would you mind taking on this one? Because I know this card's a beating. It has been flagged, but it's a fun beating. It's okay. The card's a known quantity.
She could beat me. I mean, what?
Yep.
Drana, Liberator of Malakir, is 1 black, legendary creature, vampire ally, 2/3, flying first strike. Whenever she deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature you control. She definitely can snowball out of control. She comes out early, and she has 2 keywords. There's not a lot to complain with her.
I love this card too. I drafted highly in this cube. I love it. I love first striking in, and then your team gets anthemed. It's wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just a very powerful card. And I think this is one, too, that I've observed gets misplayed often. You put the counters in after combat, and people skip that a lot. They don't realize that you keep ticking it up. I've watched this, or at least on her. Am I correct in saying that out loud? She's got an odd little counter strategy.
First strike damage, then all your normal strike damage creatures get
it's
that
the first strike,
bonus.
normal
It's
strike. Yeah,
wonderful.
it always makes it weird.
Mhm.
Yep.
And then this next one, I know this is a power outlier. Stu has just destroyed us with this card.
So this is Vivian, Monsters Advocate. 3 colorless and 2 green for a legendary planeswalker, Vivian. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast creature spells from the top of your library. You can +1 to create a 3/3 green beast creature token. Put your choice of a vigilance, a reach, or a trample counter on it. And then -2 when you cast your next creature spell this turn. Search your library for a creature card with lesser converted mana cost. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. And you're absolutely right. The last couple of times that we've drafted and I've been able to get this card on the battlefield, it is a absolute monster. And anytime you can just choose, hey, do I want to develop the board? Great. I'll just +1 and I've got now more counters, makes her more difficult to get rid of, and I've got more of a board presence. Or using that -2, which I did on more than one occasion when you've got like a 6 mana creature in your hand. Man, that feels good.
Yeah, so this is a hard to pass card too. I mean, our good friend Stephen Conefall would probably tell you to draft Sublime Epiphany and Vivian because he's the Sammich guy. But both these cards are busted as you know what. So let's kind of move on to some other cards that are busted. Stu actually found out how busted this card. Stu seems to be the one that finds the busted cards. Like he's got his own play style. He sits there and talks about he doesn't like aggro, but he likes to try to make this faux aggro on the regular.
This is not aggro.
It feels a lot about like aggro when you do it.
It's
This is
Gruul.
not an aggro card.
It's Gruul.
This feels like mid range.
Stu converts everything to aggro.
How dare you? How dare you, Anthony? I refute that.
First of all, I should be a little offended you didn't hand the Gruul friends over to me.
You can have it. Take it, because I
Yes.
don't want Stu to
Thank
have it. He's
you.
not allowed to have this anymore. He broke it.
I've had my cake. Thank you.
All right, what you got?
Helena and Elena partners are 2 red-green for a legendary human ranger, 2/3 with first strike and reach. At the beginning of combat of your turn, put X +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control, where X is Helena and Elena's power. That creature also gains haste until end of turn. Spooky. Essentially, the next cards that you get to play at its floor get an additional 2 +1/+1 counters and have haste the turn it comes in. The reason that this isn't an aggro card, because when you're playing aggro, around 4 is when you're looking to like cap out in terms of what your like mana expenditure is going to be. And this is the card that rewards you for the things after that.
I don't disagree, but here's why I will also, much to my own chagrin and Anthony's pleasure, because he always loves when I'm talking bad about the archetypes or talking good about the archetypes that I kind of disparaged on. But the thing that I do think makes this card so strong as an early and low to the ground aggressive card is that even your 1 mana 1/1 mana dorks or your 2 mana 1/2 or 2/1 utility creatures are all of a sudden smacking for at least 4 damage on the turn that they come down. So this is, would I say it's an aggro card? Maybe not necessarily, because it is a 2/3 for 4, even with the first strike and the reach, and you do require some build around for it. So I do agree that it's a little more on the mid-rangey side, but you can build a very, very aggressive deck with this card.
Yeah, so this is another one of my highly recommends. Don't pass it. As a matter of fact, just take all these cards, take them out of the draft. But these are great.
Like Mother of Runes?
Yeah, Mother of Runes is not in here. But I chose Chris chose Violence. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But I chose Giver of Runes in this cube, which I didn't list on here, but I would say is definitely a high tier card in this cube, just for the reasons for what it is.
Agreed.
And the next card that I want to talk about, and the final card that I want to talk about that I love, and I want to credit to our good friend Jordan Eckenrode, who recommended this to me forever ago when he made this delightful video about the Femme Cube. The person actually kind of sparked the idea of I should make a podcast because Jordan and I were talking so much. But Dream Trawler was the card that he recommended to me. For 2 colors and white, and blue, cost 1 million mana. We've talked about this before for 3/5. Get a creature Sphinx. Absolutely gorgeous art. I mean, the art and everything is just stunning to me. Flying lifelink. Whenever you draw a card, Dream Trawler gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. Whenever Dream Trawler attacks, draw a card. Discard a card. Dream Trawler gains hexproof until the end of the turn. Tap it. Sure. This card kind of embodies the perfect synergies that I'm looking for a top-end control card. And my little brother and I did some playtesting recently, and I used this in combination with Fractured Identity. And it was not a good day for Josh. It was not. But that is also in this cube. So buyer beware. I am pushing power thresholds. It looks and feels and plays some of the archetypes that you can find in a peasant environment. But I am pushing. I'm just that person. You know, I take Innistrad. I try to shove it all the way to the max. I take Mirrodin and I shove it to the max. Why not do that with this too? It's just that style of play that I personally enjoy. And I think our play group actually enjoys this cube, and I'm going to put Chris on the spot. How do you feel about this cube in terms of where it came from and where it is now?
Oh, where it's now, it's really great. I just remember one time we drafted it, and you had there were 6 people drafting, and you had 5 aggro decks. I was like, that's a problem, buddy. And it's much better now. Like you get a lot more diverse deck diversity now. And it's really great. I like Dream Trawler a lot. Dream Trawler, Helena and Elena is an awesome little top end for an aggro deck, or it fits right into a mid-range deck very well. So it does double duty. A lot of these cards do double duty. Dream Trawler is just a nice finisher, which I think is great. I think decks like that need that. So, same with Vivian. Vivian's a nice finisher as well. It gums the board up. It makes things a lot more difficult for your opponent. You've done a lot of good stuff with this cube, man. It's a lot of fun.
And let's face it, 5 aggro decks in any draft is 5 aggro decks 2 mana.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right.
Normally, I would expect 1 or 2 in a 6-person draft, but not 5.
5 is
it ultimately comes
Remember
down
how
to
I figured that out? I was not the aggro deck in that draft, and I got demolished. Demolished.
That was because, and this is a side note that people can extrapolate from this when we're talking about our cubes, is that overly latching onto a theme and pressing too hard can come at a detriment to the healthier environment. A lot of the art that was the best cards, like the Thalias and whatever, the Captain Laundry Storms, etc., those all were just auto includes for me at the time. But what I didn't realize is that the quantity of them was just too strong. We talked about this. Boros was too leaning, and then I found myself. What was easier about this cube, though, in terms of balancing, was I got Wall of Omens reprinted, so I could throw that in, and I started putting objects in front of those to slow those decks down, to kind of restore harmony back to the cube. That was the fix. But it was an interesting, a social experiment for me, a learning opportunity. I got perspective. It taught me to be a better curator, because it did come out the gate with just a drag race car. And then I had to slow it down and flatten all 4 tires. Now it runs very smoothly. It's just been a dynamic cube to actually learn. Of all my cubes, it didn't unbalance itself. But that's enough about the Femme Cube. Thank you, though, to the Birds of Paradise for truly honoring me for selecting this cube this year. I can't tell you how I'm so excited to have everybody take a look at this cube. And I did mention before, I put a Birds of Paradise in this cube to honor them. So thank you so much.
Nice.
All right, enough about that cube. Now let's move on to the one that everybody's going to show up. This was Gavin Verney's favorite cube at CubeCon. Or I don't know about favorite, but he liked it a lot. We're going to go with liked it mostly a lot, kind of, sort of.
Loved it.
Loved it is what I got. I got feedback of liked it.
He loved it.
Chris, what you got?
So yeah, first of all, I want to thank everyone who voted for this cube. I definitely appreciate that. Getting this in again. Yeah, I've made a lot of changes since last year. There were a couple of boogeyman cards that were in there. One of them was I believe a Trigon Prime, almost like a Trigon Predator in someone's cube who shall remain nameless.
Which cube is this that we're talking about, by the way?
Is this Sammich's something cube?
Sandwich's Peasant Cube?
Oh, there we go. Oh,
there we go.
yeah, that's
Okay.
right. Yeah, I just want to know which one we're talking about.
Sandwich's Peasant Cube, yes. So, but yeah, it's made it again through a lot of changes. I've tried to, I'll tell you right now, the biggest set this year that really helped this cube out the most was Modern Horizons 3. That, without a doubt, had the most impact on this cube that I've ever seen from a single set. It single-handedly buffed many archetypes in this cube that I didn't really think were much of a thing until that set came out. So some of the better archetypes that I think would be great to play. There's aggro in white, red, and black. I put those in, especially with the additions of one of the cards in the show notes. This Arabella Abandoned Doll. Stu can speak to that one.
Oh, baby.
How well that card did.
Oh, baby.
That's from Duskmorn.
Very excited for
It is from
Arabella.
Duskmorn, but I'll take this. So this is Arabella Abandoned Doll. This is a red-white legendary artifact creature toy. Whenever Arabella Abandoned Doll attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. So I will say I did not build this deck as an aggro deck. I built it as I am going to incidentally try and create as many of these 1 and 2 power creatures as possible, and then just wait for my opportunity to go alpha and just take my opponents out in maybe one fell swoop, or, just put them in a position where the game was out of their reach, which I did on basically every occasion that I played with deck. I think this was another one I went 2-1 with, but I played a game against our good friend Christian, and he was just running running all over me at one point, and I got to just do exactly that. I filled the board with a bunch of little 1/1s. I think it was Spectral Procession, as well as a couple of other cards that had developed the board state. And this card came down. It wasn't answered. I turned it sideways. All of a sudden, Arabella's dealing 5 damage. My creatures are dealing 4 or 5 damage. I'm gaining 5 life. And the game at that point was just over. So yeah, this is one that I haven't been looking at the newer cards as much as I used to. But Arabella immediately, given that she's an uncommon, given that it's so flavorful in like a million different ways. And I thought, man, this is an uncommon is going to find its way into a lot of peasant cubes, and it was magnificent in yours. Thank you.
Yeah, I looked at this card for my artifact cube, for my horror cube, for the Femme cube. I'm like, it's just because it does everything.
Femme cube might be a little.
I
bit
didn't
of a
do
stretch.
it, but I looked at it, and even the artifact cube would have been stretchy. I'm like, oh my god, it's going to break that environment. It's going to break that environment. It's going to break. I'll probably end up like landing in my horror cube, I think. But yeah, I didn't want to press the aggro, say for example in the Femme, even with the art, but I didn't want to press the aggro any further. We already talked about that was my problem I had to solve. Why add more to it? But
I think
I saw it in this environment. Oh my goodness, it's disgusting.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you need your 1 and 2 power creatures to survive. So sure, you could just be dumping a bunch of 1 and 2 powers out there and turn them sideways and try and get aggressive. But ultimately, so much of the payoff with this card means that your creatures need to be on the battlefield. So really, you can only attack when it's super safe. So you are trying to sort of hedge your bets a little bit in the hope that this card comes out. In fact, I think, Chris, the game that I played against you, which was the game that I lost, I didn't get to see Arabella. There was a couple of other real good engine cards that I didn't get to draft. And it really did highlight, like, if I get a couple of those other pieces, and I drafted other pieces in the deck to kind of keep myself alive and be able to put the pressure on, those didn't didn't come out in either of those games, and I just didn't have the ability to even be aggressive at all in those games. Whereas any of the games where I got a couple of those engine pieces out, or my opponents didn't have any removal or any board presence, which I suppose is kind of Magic 101, right? If you can't remove the creatures and you can't have any way to develop your own board, you're in trouble. But this definitely, even when there was a fair amount of interaction there, it was very, very strong.
There's one on here that I can't steal from May. It might be an otter, it might be a wizard. And I was just wondering if May, this is in the Peasant Cube, and it is bonkers. May, would you mind taking the otter and the wizard, please?
Yeah, it's Coruscation Mage, which is 1 in a red for a 2/2 otter wizard with Offspring. And in case you don't know what Offspring does, we also had an entire episode talking about Woodburrow's new mechanics. But you essentially pay its Offspring cost, and it comes in with an additional 1/1 baby of itself as a copy. So whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. This card is bonkers. So, ever wanted, like, what was his name? Gutter Snipe? Right?
Yep. Gutter Snipe. Yep.
Yeah, Gutter Snipe. Ever wanted Gutter Snipe to be on 2 bodies?
Yes.
Yep, it's better. It's better than Gutter Snipe. It's better than Gutter Snipe.
It may come down for like a mana more usually, but the fact that you can pay just to drop it on a 2 is huge. The fact that you can play it sooner than Gutter Snipe or later than Gutter Snipe and have both of them feel pretty good is just...
It triggers off of mana rocks. It triggers off of things that aren't just instants and sorceries. It's wonderful. Enchantments and everything like that. It's great. And it's really good. And this obviously... like pairs really well the Spells Matter deck that is definitely in there with like Third Path Iconoclast and Saheeli and all those fun ones that all do things when you cast non-creature spells.
Our friend Tyler, the champion of UberCubeathon, mentioned that otters were evil in a previous episode, and I passed this card. I'm like, I don't want to deal with that. Like, I've got a strategy. I don't want to deal with that. This card wrecked me. I'm like, oh my god, where's this thing? Everybody kept saying, like, what keeps shocking me? What keeps just punching me? What's happening? And I'm like, I just cast a rock. Take 2, take 3. I'm like, what is happening? I'm like, oh my god, these little offsprings were just popping me. I'm like, I hate this card. I don't think you should pass this card. I think it's wonderful, and we'll end it with otters are evil.
They're just sneaky little gremlins. It's fine.
Sneaky little gremlins.
Sneaky little critters.
All right, you heard it here
another
first.
archetype that I would recommend if you want to do well, in my opinion, is the in Mardu, and it's the Aristocrats deck. I think Anthony did a good job with that the last draft we did with this, right before I packed it in for CubeCon. Marionette Apprentice being one of the feature ones in that, where it's a 1 and a black for a 1/2 with Fabricate 1. Fabricate 1 says you can either put a counter on Marionette Apprentice, or you can do the right play and make a 1/1 servo. And it says whenever another creature artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. That's very wonderful. It works really well with that. It goes well with the Aristocrats. I am running other Aristocrats pieces, obviously. And I think he's also got another one listed here, which he might want to take.
Well, I was going to say, we got another Timu card, right? So this is like Marionette Master. Mom can have Marionette Master. We have Marionette Master at home. Marionette Master at home.
Yes, this
and
is
it's
the Timu version,
Apprentice.
yes.
It's
but a little bit better.
But yeah,
I actually do think it's better since it comes down sooner.
Yeah, I think it's better too. I run this in the Femme Cube, and I run this in the Uber Bears Artifact Cube that you'll see at CubeCon 2024. When this set came out, and I was harsh on this set, but I was not harsh on this card. This card I was high on. I knew this card is going to do some work, and it is worth its weight in gold. I love her. She is. This is a hard card to pass. I mean, think about it. Like, even if you're just splashing just to get that residual, just that little life loss, right? I mean, it doesn't cost you anything to cast this card, even for a minor splash.
I think the critical thing is the fact that it's another creature or artifact, which is, again, the same as Marionette Master. You still get that, get that drain or get that life loss on your opponent. But it's such great value. You're getting a 1/2 from the Marionette Apprentice, and you're getting the servo, and you're getting that static ability as well on the card itself. So I think from a straight up value perspective, you can't go wrong.
I thought you had another card in here that was a bomb, and I looked at it and I was thinking, oh my god, is he running this card? Yes, he is. Marauding Sphinx, Chris. Do you not feel bad about adding this card? I mean, it's got Ward 2, Flying Vigilance. Oh my god, this card's so good. Could you tell them what this does and why they shouldn't pass this card and they should scoop it up?
whenever you commit a crime, you surveil too. Ability triggers only once a turn. It's a 3/5 flyer, which is really nice for 3 and 2 blue. It's a nice little top end for a blue deck that's not trying to cheat stuff out or do anything crazy like that. I really like this card a lot. When it was spoiled, it does a lot for what it does.
Have you considered running this in your bug cube because of the surveil mechanic it has on it?
It's already in there. It's in there.
Yeah, that
it's
makes
already
sense.
In there.
It's so strong.
Mm-hmm.
So we were drafting this past Thursday, and I looked at Chris because somebody passed me a card. Was this last Thursday? It was actually the previous week. I apologize. It was the previous week where I had Marionette Mastered, and I give you a glance like, oh my God, they passed this card, and it was Sanguinary Priest. And I was like, do they not know how good this card is? This card is busted in this environment because let's put a pin in this for a second. I heard the takeaway from last year is that aristocrats were extremely powerful in your environment. Have you done anything to rectify that besides adding Marionette Apprentice?
And Sanguinary Priest.
No. I want them to continue to be powerful. But what I have done is try to boost other archetypes, much like May was talking about, because I don't want to water it down. There's no reason to do that. But when you can make other archetypes, like I will give you an example. An example of an archetype that has gotten better this year is just Gruul Aggro has gotten better. And it's through basically just a couple of cards like Writhing Chrysalis, which if people don't know what that is, like 3 red and green, makes like a 2/3 with reach. And when you cast it, you get 2 little 01 Eldrazi spawn or Scions. I can't remember which one it is. It's one of those 2.
Spions. They're Spions.
Yeah, the 01, whatever the 01 is, whatever the 01 version is. And that card, and also something like, Malevolent Rumble. That's another one that came out in Modern Horizons 3. That's another one that made that deck better. And the big one is Up the Beanstalk. I've decided to add that one, which that card has made that deck just hum. And it works really well with things like Grumgully. All those kind of cards, those red-green cards, it's really powerful. And I didn't realize how good it was until our good friend of the show, Bill, drafted it a couple of times and just demolished the drafts.
I mean, I will say, Up the Beanstalk is banned in Modern, and Malevolent Rubble is like a vintage cube card. So really not a huge surprise that they're going to be powerful in a lot of environments. But I always say that cards, especially like Malevolent Rumble, they're only so good as what you can get out of it, even if you're looking for some kind of value. It's not a value engine, it's not a super undercosted, overpowered creature, but it really does reward players for how they're building their decks and the archetypes that they're within. So I think cards like that are just fantastic. And yeah, I agree. I have gone up against some of those red-green aggro-y kind of decks in this cube, and they're very strong.
So this is the second time that this cube has been selected by the listeners and by community vote. And my question for you is, what did you learn from last year, and what lessons learned have you taken into 2024 CubeCon?
I did learn that the only reason Sammich did okay was because of Trigon Prime. I've been trying to work on Sammich for a long time. Sammich is easily my hardest kind of color pairing to get to work right. I've added a few cards that hopefully will make it better. That isn't as much as punishing as Trigon Prime, but hopefully will still do well. I've also learned that criticism is what it is. You take it for what it is, and don't let anyone who has anything that negative to say really bother you. So anytime you receive criticism, just take it for what it is. People are drafting your cube once. A lot of times it's positive, but sometimes it's not, and you can't take it as too much as just take it with a grain of salt. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think that's great lessons learned. The next, we joked about this in the beginning of the episode and said, what if there was a social experiment where someone built a cube, never really played it before, and then injected it into CubeCon 2024? Hi, my name's Anthony. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Anthony.
And so the Monopoly, we built this originally as a 216 bar cube-ish desert environment. And the gist of the cube
Chris's favorite. By the way, let's just say, Sammich's favorite. Loves his desert
environments.
Loves his desert
cube. Me and Desert Cube.
He's also a huge fan of the game Monopoly. Tell us how much you love Monopoly, Chris.
Oh, yeah. Monopoly. Oh, God, don't. But we're done.
Yeah. So what if I took two things that Chris loved and made it into a
You
cube?
can say anything positive about it.
So we kind of did this as it was originally a 4-player cube, and I ran that for about 3 months, and it actually turned out pretty fun. It was fast. It was a good little back porch magic type of thing for we missed Stu's sitting on the back porch during the fall and playing. It was something to do. But I wanted something, again, to challenge myself, and I'm going to say that this is probably my last cube, probably not, but I think it's kind of where I'm tying it off and perfecting my other cubes. But I wanted to do something a little bit outside of my comfort zone, mimicking the idea of our good friend Bones and ChillMTG and those people who went before us and built these desert cube environments. We didn't have one in our play group, but I wanted to put a little spin on it. If I could take Monopoly, and I could take a desert environment and I could mash them together. And we did this with our Sushi Go kind of concept that we did. What if I could take a game that people are familiar with and turn it into a magic type scenario, right? Make a world out of it.
We're trying to, we're bringing cubes that are going to be at a public event. What we don't want is people flipping tables and yelling at each other. And I don't know if you guys have played Monopoly before, but every time I've played Monopoly, someone has ended up flipping a table and getting all mad and yelling that they're poor. And there's a lesson to be learned there. I feel
the banker
like,
always wins.
The bank always wins.
I don't know why.
Capitalism.
Yeah.
Capitalism. Baby.
So that's what's interesting. He's saying all the things. So not to go geopolitical or apolitical, whatever you want to do, right? I wanted to build a cube inspired by economics. So the idea is all the card names, everything from piggy bank to taxation cards to, we'll just say, weird little kind of go to jail cards that I put in there that are memes. I even have the dog from Monopoly. I have the battleship. I yet to have a wheelbarrow or a thimble. Wizards, I need a Universes Beyond of a thimble and a wheelbarrow special request. But I would love to just kind of make this meme type cube. And as you look through it, I'm hoping people catch all the little vibes. There's a bear and there's a bull in the cube. Markets. There's all these little goofy things that I'm doing. I'm having just a wonderful time. There's theft in there. There's interesting cards. But what was really cool about this cube is I built it. We tested it at 4. Never tested it at 8. We had one bar day where our good friend Kirby and other people came down and we tested it out. Other than that, I went to the Capital Cube Championships, and our good friend Lincoln allowed me to have it kind of post the actual event, have it featured for the side event. And I got all this really great feedback. Like, I'm making all these treasures. What do I do with them? So I had to kind of solve that before we went to CubeCon 2024. And I appreciate everybody that did that for me because I got some really amazing feedback. So I put in cards like Maelstrom Nexus, where everything gets cascade, 5 colors. I wanted something for payoffs. You got all these treasures. What do you do with them, right? Maelstrom Nexus was a fun card. I wanted to add like spicy things like that. And I'm thanking everyone at the Capital Cube Championships for giving me that feedback because they're like, you need this. And I wanted to add a few spicy cards in there. You have all this accumulated wealth because there's 2 routes you can take here. You can burn your treasures to progress your board state to get it out quick, or you can save your treasures for the value that it adds. You have a choice to make because the mana base outside of the basic lands in the desert environment come into play tapped. So there's an interesting little dichotomy that happens in this cube. I wanted to try something different. I wanted my natural mana to be slow, and I wanted the treasure tokens to press you forward. But if you burn them, you're now cutting off access for the big spells or the big wins or the things that get payoffs. So I want to talk about one card that's here in the front called All That Glitters. This is an example of what if you saved your treasures, didn't burn them, and you just made this monstrosity. For 1 colorless and a plains, get an enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and enchantment you control. Pretty simple aura. But it is devastating whenever you put it on a creature and you have chosen at that point to save your treasures. Would you agree, Stu?
Yes, it does help to have more artifacts if you have an enchantment that is giving your creature +1/+1 for each artifact. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, very obvious answer, yes.
Yeah, I have died so many times this stupid enchantment. This stupid enchantment. It's just like,
But you have this, like, there's a tension in this cube, right? Because you want to... Your lands are coming in sideways, but yet you want to get board presence to do whatever pseudo aggro you're doing, but you're thwarted by that. So you put your treasures out. So you burn them to press forward, or you save them to make this bigger. That's where it gets super weird. There's so much tension in this game.
all right, I'll be honest. I don't think about it that much. I am of the opinion that this to me has always been kind of a passive benefit, right? 2 mana, it's +1/+1 for each artifact and or enchantment, right? So you've already got all that glitters that counts as +1/+1. So a 2 mana +1/+1 isn't great, but I know there are other incidental effects that give artifacts. I also know that in future turns, I should, if I've built a deck that has any kind of synergy with having artifacts or enchantments on the field, that I should be able to grow a creature pretty good. So I like this card. I understand that there is always going to be some tension there, right? So if you're looking to either swing for, lethal with one big flying attack, or, you're trying to get through on the ground, or you're trying to even defend against the large thing that your opponent has, then yeah, it does create some tension. And there is going to be some conscious thought there of the fact that I don't want to make whatever creature I'm relying on, either on the defense or the offense, to get too small, because I need to rely on this high power, high toughness creature. But to me, I like this because it fits in fairly organically, if you will. Like the tension can be there, but I feel like this just fits in the cube because it's rewarding you for one of two things, right? You're either dumping all of your treasure mana into something that's impacting you positively in one way, or you're just saving your treasures for a big creature.
This next one, though, so I agree with you 100%. Like, I just think these cards create like that spend or save type of dichotomy that I'm looking for when I created this environment. This next card, though, and I'm kind of skip over one that I have here, is Cabal, the Profiteering Mare. And this is one that I've never play tested and I'm fearful of. So here we go. Fortune favors the bold. 1 colorless and Orzhov. You get a legendary creature, human advisor, 2/4. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, for each of them, create a tap token that's a copy of it. This ability triggers only once. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. It's kind of icky.
It's fine.
I don't know if it's fine.
No, I think it's fine. I think it's fine. I mean, it's not. You can only do it once a turn. It's not the worst. It's not the worst, not the best. It's going to be decent, I think, though.
So I think, let's first of all start on the first paragraph. Whenever one or more tokens enters the battlefield under your opponent's control, for each of them create a tapped token that's a copy of it, right? So now, obviously, I'm not just thinking about creatures, I'm thinking about treasures, I'm thinking about anything that my opponent may be trying to either incidentally or purposely do to build as an engine for their deck, or as a payoff for their deck, right? So especially any kind of go-wide strategy, now I have a good counter to it. Then the second paragraph, whenever one or more tokens enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and gains 1 life. So now you've got just a real straight up, whatever you're trying to do, I'm going to, if it's on that token side, if it's with treasures, if it's with token creatures, I'm going to kind of have a way to balance that. And it's only with this one card that is a 2/4 and is only 3 mana. I feel like this is a very, very powerful card in this environment, again, where treasures are such a big part of this cube, and any kind of token strategy is going to be made very, very difficult unless you're either sacking them for some kind of other value. But if you're trying to get them through on the ground, then this card is just going to make it very, very difficult.
May, did I make a mistake?
So the mistake that you made was that whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your opponent's control, not your control, then you make a copy of it. So this is important because, yes, sometimes you will be able to get it off of your opponent, and in this environment, it's going to be so dense, people are going to be trying to make those treasure tokens. It's going to come up. That's already a powerful effect. But it also triggers the second effect, which makes it so that way it independently can do its own thing, while also rewarding you for making tokens. And I think the thing that makes it very strong is the fact that it has a 4-bet. Like, if this thing was just like a 2/2, then I think that it would be a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for?
Underwhelming.
Ignorable?
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And let's face it, I don't really care if my opponent, or I'm not really expecting, if you will, my opponent to be casting 2 or 3 or more spells a turn that's creating them treasures or creating them tokens, because I only need that ability to trigger once per turn for me to also get that benefit from it, right? Whereas that second ability is happening just every time. So, but again, that 2/4 body is incredibly strong in any environment, right? If I got 4 toughness on the battlefield, you're now bumping up against any kind of aggressive strategy or certainly any token strategy. So I think, not that I want to say this should be watch list, but it should be watch list.
I put it in here with intent.
I'd keep an eye on it.
I would keep
This
an
is
eye
the
on it.
this is the
I'm gonna
villain of
disagree.
my
I think
cube.
Trump's
I wanted this with intent. I have a corrupt sheriff in here. I have a corrupt mayor in here. I wanted this entire seedy world where the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. That's the whole design of the cube. This cube is meme riddled. I want to go ahead and add this next card here, and I can't take this away from May because this is me denouncing Mill and then accepting a little bit of Mill at the same time because there's a super secret little thing here. May, would you mind taking on this next card, please?
Sure. So the next one you have is Anowin the Ruin Thief. It's 2 blue-black for a vampire rogue 2/4. Other rogues you control get +1/+1. Whenever one or more rogues deal combat damage to a player, that player mills a card for each 1 damage dealt to them. If that player mills at least 1 creature card this way, you draw a card. Neat. So, essentially, it's a way that you can mill your opponents out. If they happen to hit creatures, great. If not, then oh well. But I see its floor of, this is a 4-mana 2/4 that rewards you for being in rogues.
Yes. And so the super secret thing that I've held back, and I may have mentioned it in a previous episode, there are a ton of rogues in this environment. This card is like literally the tie that binds. So if somebody can grab this, it is not hard to pick up something that says rogue on it. There's so many of them.
I will say firsthand, I did build rogues the last time we played this cube, and I did have this card, and it was incredibly powerful. I think any kind of anthem effect that has an ability tacked onto it is really nice to have. But when you're not just that you're milling your opponent, but you're also dealing incremental damage to them at the same time that you're swinging, that this can get pretty out of control, and it was very, very strong in the deck that I drafted.
It's the only linchpin to that idea. So there's other rogue payoffs that I'm not going to reveal.
This
So
is pick one, pack one.
it is.
It is that
it.
quality, because like you say, there is so much rogue support, and you don't need in a cube like this. Let's just be honest. You don't need to go nuclear with a particular strategy. Like, you're not looking for a certain critical number of 2 or 3 real linchpin. For a lot of the decks, a lot of the time the value can be fairly spread out. But with this card, you're getting so much incremental value with a bunch of other cards that also have so much of their own value built into them. So I think this is why a card like this, you could, if you were incredibly pessimistic, you could argue that it's maybe a little win more, which I don't really agree with, because it's not like any of the rogues in the cube are particularly overpowered themselves. But this is just such a nice gravy piece, and really, really helps if you're down a little bit on board, or if you're trying to squeeze through some damage towards the end or build your presence to squeeze through the win. This is why cards like this can be powerful. Watch list, not necessarily, but definitely very strong in a deck that supports it so well.
I'm testing micro synergies. I wanted to know if I could have, there's other synergies in here around rogues, but they're very light touch. But this card is kind of the apex of that. If you can get that and then form the other rogues and find your way down that path, then here we are. You could potentially mill your opponent out and or do damage, right?
You should be trying to mill your opponents out, because I don't know if you know this, but Magic players really, really love losing to mill. It's just... all Magic players love losing to mill. They love seeing an empty library. They love trying to draw a card and then losing the game because they have no cards in their library. So this is just a really fun experience for your opponents. Do the right thing and just mill your opponents out and allow them to lose with having an empty library. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do.
Chris, I think this next card is, and we're going to kind of wrap up here, I think this card is the most contested card in the entire cube. It's the secret
We
little...
talking about the little currency converter?
Yes.
Yes, I love this card. This card incidentally works really well with Anawan. So it's a for 1 mana. Whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. It's got an activated ability, 2 activated abilities. The first one is pay 2, then draw a card, then discard a card. That powers itself. And then you can put a card, tap it to put a card, exile with currency converter into your graveyard. If it's a land card, create a treasure. Goes with the theme of the Monopoly Cube right there. If it's a non-land card, then you create a nice little 2/2 black rogue creature token that can be a 3/3 if you happen to have an Anawan in the field. So it works really well. This card is, to me, very first pickable in this cube, and I would slam this if I saw this.
And there's only one.
I think you're going to probably
struggle. One, I remember.
Yeah, this is like, you're going to struggle to really tell me a lot of cubes where this isn't first pickable, right? The fact that you've got such a cheap and easy to use engine, it's only 1 mana to cast, 2 mana to be able to sculpt your hand is beautiful. The fact that you can tap just to get a 2/2 black rogue creature token onto the battlefield at instant speed is powerful enough by itself. So I think just from a card selection quality, there's a reason why this card, again, vintage cube playable card, very, very powerful in its own right. And again, with the synergies that it has with other cards in this cube, I think just makes it very, very powerful.
I want to add one more tag, and this is another thank you to the Capital Cube Championships crew that played this. I added containment construct and bag of holding. There's a whole new line of play in there too. I don't want to unlock too many secrets. I'm telling you, this cube is so riddled with little tiny synergies. It's insane. I'm curious to see how many get unlocked.
It sounds like you're just telling everyone to play rogues. Right now,
I'm hinting at it a little bit,
and to put on all the glitters on.
If you're listening, I'm giving you a little bit of inside tricks here. But yeah, so this is a first time cube. It's been played a couple of times. It does require eight players at a pod. It is a 432 card cube. It does get drafted in 3 packs of 18. It's a little weird. And the last recommendation is I would take 5 to 6 lands per pack to make sure you have a good construction, but the treasures will get you there. And other than that, I think this has kind of been a nice little overview. May, Chris, do you have anything to offer to the listeners? We kind of did some tie-offs here, some ideas that you've learned while we're talking about this.
Yeah, draft the good cards.
Draft the good cards.
You heard it here, folks.
We put a lot of thought into this, and hopefully that the players will be able to receive this and feel the differences from last year.
I love that. Draft the good cards.
Same. I think I have a very similar thought process there. Hopefully you find the open lane and go for it.
And come up to us and talk to us, because we're going to have our little buttons on. But give us your active feedback, right? We want as curators, this goes for all curators, we want feedback that's actionable. So please provide the scenario in which XYZ occurred, so that we can try to replicate the idea, because the Monopoly hasn't been tested in the field of battle. The Femme is going in fresh, right? These 2 cubes have never seen this before. The other cubes that we've talked about have seen this large event in some sort, but it's something that it's worth its weight in gold to curators to receive positive feedback, critical feedback, but we need it in doses that make sense, right? I can't express that enough. We need to know why you felt this way. What was the scenario? How did it happen? So we can replicate the idea to determine if it's real. I mean, we got to know, right? Data's data. May, you're all about that data.
We do like data.
Yep.
All about the data.
And data is very hard in cubes. All right. Other than that, I'm looking so forward to seeing everyone at CubeCon. I'm hoping this is some mildly easy listening on your journey there. And other than that, we've got some spooky season stuff coming up soon. Hang in there. Got more episodes coming down the pipe. It is the season of the spooky.
It is.
All right. Take us to socials.
All right. First of all, again, to all of our Patreons, to Chris Fitzgerald, Timber Dragon, Brian Christensen, Keaton Schultz, Lord Justice, Chris Singer, Nick LaPointe, Preston, and Sam McKenna. Big thanks to all of you guys for the ongoing support, keeping the lights on here at UberCube. If you want to get in on the discussion, check out the Magic the Gathering Facebook drafting page at facebook.com/groups/MTGCube. Our resident host, Anthony Adams, is an administrator and would love to answer all of your questions and concerns and comments about Cube. If you love the show, please give us a 5-star review on your chosen podcast platform. platform. And you can also use our ultrasleeves.com/UberCube affiliate link for 5% off your purchase, as well as our inkedgaming.com/UberCube affiliate link gets all of your playmats, dice bags,
large volume products,
and not mouse mats, mouse pads,
mats,
and all kinds of custom and large volume products available. Discord. You can find us at Twitter. We are at UberCubeMTGPod. You can also reach us via email at UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. If you've got a longer question or comment about an episode or about your cube, you want some feedback, you want some advice, hit us up and let us know. As always, reach out to us and look at the Discord. I want to see those deck boasts. I put a couple in there myself. I think you'll be impressed.
And I want to just go ahead and pause, Stu, for a second and say thank you to our good friend Preston, who has been one of our longest and most supportive Patreons. We're looking forward to gaming with you whenever we get to CubeCon 2024.
Sounds good. And with that, we're going to say what we always say here at UberCube, which is...
Happy CubeCon 2024!